Good.
Process, we're good to go. For your committee.
City council meeting brought to you by Ohio.
Hello, everybody. Okay, well, I think Mr. Tanner is going to tell us some interesting things now. It's the floor.
Bold choice of words using the word interesting, but okay. All right. So council, as I think we've all individually discussed, the reserve balance account. So we're going to refer to it as the reserve balance account, but colloquially, that's a $3 word, it has been referred to as the rainy day fund. So the reserve balance account, if you look back into the 2018 legislation, it tracks 2017. It tracks the reserve balance account through the general fund. It bases it off of the prior year expenses. This has, I'll keep my opinions to myself, but this has wound up encumbering or appropriating about, we're up to $3,056,000 in the general fund. If I were to continue budgeting that, that would be a significant amount of money that we are essentially just holding up in the general fund. I think after having a conversation with basically all of you, myself and the mayor included, basically everybody in this room, I think we all thought it was in an interest-bearing account. It is not. It is being held within the general fund.
Is the general fund not interest-bearing, though?
Nope. As far as I'm aware, it is not.
You don't put it in star or something like that?
We have, so as far as after Paul and I had this discussion, we have outside of the continually received revenue, we have $13 million in cash reserves, and we have a little over $6 million in different, be it CDs, money market funds, and those star accounts that the president just referred to.
So the main account has a sweep feature on it. So there's approximately $3 million in this sweep feature. And so when at the end of the day, if the account is negative, it sweeps money in there. And if the account is positive, it sweeps money out into this. It does have an interest-bearing account at that point. We also have another account, which is in a money market account, treasuries, pretty liquid, that we can get to whenever we want, and that has about $13 million in it. So there's a few checking accounts that have low balances that aren't earning any interest, but most all of our funds earn some type of interest.
So, and that's a reference to that 4901, I believe, which is the
Correct.
basic general
Yep.
business. So there are some semantics there as far as is that bearing interest. It is not, I think the most important thing to note here is that it's not its own separate fund. It is tracked through essentially the 101, which is the general fund, and specifically the 3600 fund. And it has a line item associated, which is 511. I don't think you care. But we recognize the importance now of doing three separate things. Number one is capping this. We've talked about this in the past. This legislation bases it off of anticipated annual revenues of the next the following year. We based it on 13% of the current numbers that we have. Why 13%? That's just because where it is right now. Actually, if we use that $3,056,000 figure based off of anticipated revenues of around $20 million next year, it's actually sitting around 15%, a little over 15%. I've talked to a couple council members, and their question was, if we cap it at 15 or 13% and we have a crazy influx of the general fund, would we have to put more money into it? Well, yes. What would happen is the budget line is currently, it just says reserve balance account. It would transition to a transfer to, we have several of those, a transfer to reserve balance account, and then we would adjust. If we need to put an additional, $100,000 in, then that's what we would do to get it up to that 13%, as we have talked about in the past. I think any sort of interest that it would bear would probably meet that cap as we went along the way. But should, a crazy influx of $5 to $10 million happen in the general fund and anticipated revenues, the answer is yes, we would have to meet that 13 benchmark every year through a transfer. The second thing it does is it creates that interest-bearing account. Then that's when I would lean on our treasurer and auditor to put their heads together and decide what the best investment strategy is at that point. We could either manage that in-house, or we could do something similar to what the county does and have a third-party investment manager handle that. If you read in the legislation, if we chose to go that route, what would happen is between the treasurer, the auditor, and myself, we would basically come up with a list, kind of make a recommendation to council, and then council would get to choose kind of through a contract the same way we do with other like bids and whatnot. Council would choose that third-party investment management. And then finally, it transitions to that interest-bearing account. So there are essentially three major things that it does. The transition was the big question at first is, if we're moving this from the general fund, do we want to do it in three, Mr. Miller and I learned a fun word this year, tranches or disbursements. We thought we could do it $1 million and some change over a few fiscal years. We had that conversation with Ms. Woods. She was not a fan of doing that. So we started talking with Mr. Mayville and looking at that 13 million in cash reserves, or we included in the legislation if there are what we would consider poorly performing, whether it's money market funds or CDs, poorly performing investments. We would look at potential better rates of return on whatever investment account that they would choose, and we'd take either from those investments or from the cash reserves and move that $3,056,000 capped at that 13%, which it's already higher than 13% based off of anticipated revenues. But we would take that, put it in that fund no later than July, and then we would be able to move forward. So what that does is it creates a true interest-bearing reserve balance account separated to itself. As Mrs. Seavold asks, the three reasons that we can access that fund remain the same. Nothing changes. We're not spending anything out of the reserve balance account. And one of the main questions that we'll have to ask is the accessibility. Like, should, God forbid something terrible happens, or, good fortune come our way and we have an opportunity to invest. That's another one of those opportunities to access it. Can we readily access the reserve balance account? And that will be one of those things that we'll have to ask ourselves. But when we find that account that we want to put the money in. But so those are all the boxes that we'll have to check as we create that account. But that's what this legislation does, is it caps it at 13%. It creates that, or gives permission for us to create that interest-bearing account. And then finally, it transfers the money, whether it be from cash reserves or from poorly performing interest. Go ahead.
Question, man. Thank you, Tanner. And I'm generally in favor of this, but I do have a question. We've talked about, and I think everyone can understand the need for a family, reserve, whether it's
Sure.
2 months, 3 months, emergency fund. What is I know we talked about this before, but remind us, or me, what the recommendation is from the state for a municipal emergency fund. There's a certain percentage or amount.
Yes. So the state of Ohio's rainy day fund, or their reserve balance account, is set at 8.75%. If you ask me why it is set at 8.75%, I will tell you I do not know.
It's a month.
It's a month.
It's 1 month.
1 month.
Well, there you go.
1 month's the minimum, 2 months is better, 3 months is
Sure.
flush.
So we are already almost at that with, I think, the $3,056,000 that I anticipated at a, $20 million anticipated revenue is you're sitting at roughly 2 months. And that's us operating under, no austere measures. Obviously, if we had to tap into the rainy day fund to operate the government, we'd be sitting here in the dark right now. So,
And you're talking about 13%. There's general fund and non-general funds.
Absolutely,
Specifically about the general.
yeah.
Okay, thank you for that reminder. I think it's good for the public to know that we're meeting and exceeding state recommendation.
Well, I would point out, this isn't necessarily state recommendation, this is just what it's
It is
at the state. There's no
currently, yeah.
true recommendation from when I researched this. There's some vague concepts out there,
Mm-hmm.
but recommendation might be.
And we can always come in and change this 13%. We came in with the 13% based off of what we know we need to do right now.
I think that 13% is more than adequate. I know that I had conversations with Terry before he left about putting this into place, and he was in support of it, and so I have long thought that we needed to cap this.
Yeah. The cap is not a new conversation. We've talked about the cap for a while.
Tammy?
2 questions. So one of it had to do with, I calculated it's like a month and a half. So what was the reasoning behind that? And the original legislation, I was not on council. So when it was set at a percentage of expenditures is how it's currently set. Is that correct?
Yes.
Why the switch to a percentage of revenues? What was the thought process there?
So we would be able to better budget for the anticipated revenues coming into it as opposed to closing out the year and then grabbing those expenditures.
I thought I heard you say 13% of the next year's, but I think it reads of the prior fiscal year's revenues.
Does it say prior?
So should it be
It
Of
should
the-
be the
anticipated?
anticipated revenues of the,
So I'm
says-
looking at section 1A, says prior.
I'll have its annual
Anticipated
contribution.
revenues, general fund for the prior fiscal year.
It should be, what, preceding,
For the upcoming fiscal year.
upcoming, yeah.
Okay. And then why the delay in funding it till July 1, 2025?
That's just giving them an opportunity to,
Set
their-
everything up?
yeah, find the fund or, yeah.
So it's still there, it's still,
Yeah, it's not
Okay.
going anywhere. Yeah.
okay.
Doesn't necessarily mean that we are going to wait until July 1.
Yeah,
either.
no, it's,
Right.
yeah. It's a
Figured it was a timing
ceiling.
thing. Okay.
I have 2. So just to follow up with Tammy, so the plan is sometime between now, say now or in July 1 of next year, the total 13% would be put into that fund?
Yeah,
Okay.
totality. At one point, and I think Mr. Severns and I had this conversation as well, the original draft of this that we discussed had it set up in 3 disbursements over 3 fiscal years, but that was it coming directly from revenues out of the general fund. So of course, we weren't going to take a $3 million hit from the general fund all at once. That would be irresponsible. But if we take it from those cash reserves that we already have, I think we can do that with pretty well, comfortable sustainability moving forward.
So Paul, as city auditor, is it this, you've worked with the city administration on this plan and on this legislation? So this is something as a city auditor that you're fine with? This is an acceptable practice?
Yeah, I mean, there's different ways we can go about doing it, and I mean, we have, the city is pretty flush with cash as far as I can see, and we can take that amount and just kind of section off. This is kind of what we're doing right now. Section off that $3 million and just say, okay, in all of our investments, this is what it's going to be. I like the idea of separating it out. Put it in probably something that's going to be liquid and safe. So we have it, it's earning interest, we know it's there, we can show that it's there, take a picture of it, show it to people, things like that. And, yeah, and people understand that a little bit better.
And can I just say, it sounds like it's been in the general fund. So the general fund, or a large portion of the general fund, has been interest-bearing. It's just, this hadn't been in its own fund to segregate off the interest it's been earning.
And I think it has mostly been tracked by the general fund, but even last year when we talked about, carryover and whatnot, specifically within the general fund, I think at one point we had a reported $1.75 million carryover. Well, if we've got a floor of $3,056,000, we spent the rainy day fund.
Which we did.
Whoops. Yeah.
But in order to touch that, you're still saying it has to meet the three criteria.
Yeah, so, right.
It's in the legislation.
If it's, and that's the concern that we have, is if you leave it in the general fund without, kind of sequestering it to its own fund, you run the risk of, we had a carryover, but if the floor is $3,056,000, then you should, zero is $3,056,000. And anything over that is a carryover. What we want to do, that's leaving it in the general fund, which is where it is now. And basically, it's just a large number on a spreadsheet at this point. So our goal is to put it in its own fund, let it bear interest separately, let it be a liquid asset that we can access at any, well, not at any point in time. We'll have to come back to, otherwise Janice will catch me in a dark alley. But other than that, I think that's the best step moving forward. And if the public's asking, well, why now? One, it's growing not exponentially, it's growing considerably in the general fund. And by moving it now, we have a lot more flexibility in that 101-3600 in the general fund to actually appropriate into other projects or whatever we need in the general fund.
My time is up. We need to pass this tonight. Is that all right with everybody if I put this through tonight?
Are we going to amend then the prior fiscal year to say?
It's fine. That was the intent. That was in the intent. If you want to amend that, yeah.
Upcoming?
Good catch.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to adjourn the Finance Committee. We can move now to Streets and Public Buildings with Mr. Severns to discuss the RFQ for the municipal building construction.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. We do have some people here tonight.
We have Ben Hayden from Bricker Graydon. Bricker has worked with the city on a number of different projects in the past, and they'll be assisting us in the contracting and construction portion as we move forward on the new municipal buildings, as well as the significant work we're doing at the wastewater treatment plant. He is here today to talk about the legislation that we have on tap, which is the construction manager at risk, and we'll go from there.
Good evening, members of council. As Rob said, my name is Ben Hayden. I'm a construction attorney for Bricker Graydon down in Columbus. This is Chris Butler. He's an associate with me in Columbus. He's here to help if you guys have any questions. My presentation, is to give you guys some background of what procurement models are available to you guys as you get ready to embark on 3 construction projects. You guys feel free to stop me at any time if you have any questions. If you want to go to the first slide. Under the Ohio Revised Code, there are really 4 procurement models that you guys have available. One is multiple prime. That was the only model available prior to 2012 when construction reform was passed by the General Assembly. After 2012, you had public owners were given 3 new options: general contracting, construction manager at risk, and design bid build. We're looking at construction manager at risk for the 3 upcoming projects, so I'll talk a little bit longer on those when we get to them. If you want to go to the next one. This is multiple prime. We call this the wheel of misfortune because the owner holds all the prime contracts. So the owner, in essence, is the general contractor because it has the duty of coordinating all of the prime contractors. Thankfully, this process or this method has gone out with the new options. It's probably the one that's used the least, if it's even used at all, because the cons are very expensive. The owner basically has to hire a construction manager agent to coordinate the schedules and the pay applications. They get stuck in the middle of delay claim disputes between the multiple prime contractors. And if the owner omits a scope of, or if the design professional omits a scope of work or doesn't specify clear scopes, then the there's a scope gap, and the owner has to pay for that scope gap by change order to include it in a scope. So I have to talk about it because it's still available, but we don't recommend it anymore to owners. The next one is just your traditional general contracting. They take out that will of misfortune and push it down to the general contractor. So the general contractor holds all of the contracts. The real difference between the two is you do pay a general contractor markup. But I do remind people that you pay that markup because they take all of that administration and coordination to their subcontractors that the owner would do if it was a multiple prime project. So it's an expense well worth spending because they do provide a service for it. Again, the pros are you got a single source of responsibility for construction. So if there's a defective work, a delay issue, you look at the general contractor to make the corrective action. There's less coordination because you're dealing with one contractor. You're looking at one pay app a month. You're looking at one schedule update a month. And it's just easier for the owner to manage. The cons are, you still get design disputes, design issues, design caused delays. The next one, and this is the one we're looking at for, yes, sir.
On design delays. So with this type of a system, is this a system where the owner, the city, provides you with, this is our designs, this is the plans, and you go with that? Is there room as the CMR for change in there if there's a way to find significant savings?
Under the CMR process, yes, there is.
There's room for projects to change if you find a way to save money.
Yeah, and we.
Now, do you look for that, or does the owner look for that?
Let's see. You would hire you would hire the construction manager at risk to perform what's called pre-construction services, and it would be their job to do a constructability review of the documents, coordination of all the design documents, and they would be hired during the pre-construction services to look for those design savings.
And they would. So any and all reports or findings that the city might have would be provided to the CMR.
Correct.
And then you guys would take those into consideration, make recommendations back to the city, or would you just go with what the city says?
Well, you would have options, right? And the city's the ultimate decision maker, right? So not you guys, not the attorneys, but the construction manager at risk.
Okay, yeah.
After evaluating the documents and reviewing what options are, either if it's a site logistics thing, if it's a design change that would be save the project money or save the project time, they would, during their pre-construction services, and when I say pre-construction services, those are the steps they take before the design is 100%, right? So they want to influence design as it's being created with their construction experience and expertise and helping projects be constructed. But yes, through those multiple design turns, which we call them schematic design, design development, and construction document phase, at each of those phases, they would come up with a list of ideas of potentially saving the city money, whether it be through materials or through schedule changes or through just general site layout things that make the project get constructed quicker. They would come with those ideas. And at each of those design turns, the city would have to say, yes, implement that, or no, we don't think that's worth the savings.
Thank you.
So CMR, it's just like general contracting. You have one designer and you have one contractor. The difference is, and you can go to the next slide, Mayor. The difference is you bring the CMR on board early, and you can bring them on board at the same time you bring your design professional on, so they can perform those pre-construction services and provide input onto design and constructability and materials and potential cost savings on the project. And they are selected a little bit differently. There is an RFQ, which would be issued, and interested parties would submit statement of qualifications. The city would put together an evaluation committee, which would rank the statements of qualifications, and the top 3 ranked firms would get a request for proposal. The request for proposal is when you get the technical scope of how they're going to build the building and a very detailed breakdown of what their cost is going to look like to be the contractor. The issue is the design documents will not be complete enough to provide a lump sum GMP. So you'll see a cost structure where you'll see the their fees in a percentage that they will apply the cost of work to eventually in a year or so once the design is ready. And that cost of the work is simply made up of subcontractor pricing when they go to the market to price the actual work. Let's see, were there any other questions, any other things I want to talk about here? Any other questions, though, on CMR?
So I've worked through several CMR projects, school treasurer. I am used to either the architect being in place before or concurrent with this. So how do they meet those steps if we're not up to there yet?
Well, I don't think we have an architect engaged yet.
That's what I mean.
We've
So-
engaged, the RFQs for the architecture work have gone out, and they have come back, and the cure period was over today? Friday. And so we'll be prepared to score them, so that we will have the architect and designer in place before a CMR is selected.
Okay,
Does that answer your question on the timing?
thank you.
So off of hers, I just go back to the same thing. As far as you guys have CMR, you've got the architect designs, which I have, you don't, but I mean the city does, for two of the projects, two of the buildings.
Well, we have requests for the
Yeah.
qualifications.
Right,
to
request
do-
for qualifications, okay. So again, I'm just curious that you'll go back and look at any and all reports for cost savings.
Yes, the CMR will,
CMR.
once they're on board. And just so I can, just for a quick synopsis on how the architect's selected, you issue RFQs, you get statement of qualifications back, which I think is the phase we're at with two of the projects. Then you rank the statements of qualifications and you pick who is most qualified, the most qualified design firm. And then you go negotiate a design contract with them at that point. So we're not quite to the point of even having a contract, I believe, with the designers at this time. I just want to make sure everybody kind of knows where we are in the process. And that's why when we make the decision on which of these methods to go with, we're still at a good point to start the CMR process because we're so early in the, there has been no design completed, right? So they'll still have the ability to add input the entire time of the design.
So,
What do you mean by no design completed?
Well, I don't think we have a contract with
No, it's
either.
the-
Right, you guys have CMR.
No, is that if there was a completed design, there would be no opportunity for the CMR to make suggestions for cost savings or other changes. Is that's why you bring them on at the very beginning or at like 30% where the wastewater plant is, so that they can keep reviewing the documents to make sure that they're buildable and for the cost savings before the documents are finalized. Because finalized, they have to be submitted to the state and get approved and everything else. And so we need the CMR to suggest changes that the city will accept before they're submitted to be final.
So like conceptual designs that the city has, those are reviewed by the CMR once the CMR is a contract?
Yes. And I think they'll probably get access to that stuff if it's a public record.
Yeah.
When they prepare their when they prepare their proposals, so they'll know the details of the project.
I have a question, I'm sorry. The CMR is paid based on a percentage of what the project is, correct?
Go ahead and finish. I'm sorry.
So you're probably anticipating my question. If there's significant cost savings, why on earth would you guys present that to the city?
Well, there are two ways the CMR is paid. During the pre-construction phase, they're paid a flat rate, which is, or there's a fee, it's about $150,000,
Yeah.
maybe $200,000. And that's when they'll be looking for the cost savings.
That makes
So-
sense.
And then at the point where the construction documents are finalized, we can choose to go with the CMR, or we can go back to the traditional bid it and then build it. So the CMR, while there might appear to be some sort of incentive for them to not look for all the cost savings, we can terminate the agreement at the time of the building, and then they wouldn't save, so that it's in their interest to do the best job they can during the pre-construction, so they continue on with the construction.
I think that clarification is just.
Yeah. So the pre-construction services will be done under a lump sum contract. It's a pre-construction services contract. They will get paid a lump sum to do the design reviews, constructability reviews, and the goal is to have all those changes worked into the design before the documents go out for the CMR to go get bids from its subcontractors. and if, as Rob said, if we are not able to reach an agreement with the CMR at that point, under what we call a GMP, we would have an opportunity then to switch gears and go and just do the traditional bid, lump sum bid procurement.
We have about 17 minutes. We need to keep moving.
Oh, no, there's not too much left. So.
Okay. Good questions.
Yeah, so then there's design build. A design build is another option. You want to go to the next one, Mayor? The pros with that are you're just dealing with one entity that's doing the design and the construction. So you just have one source of one source of responsibility for everything on your project. The cons are it's a little bit more expensive. The fee structure is a little bit higher, and the other last con is, or the last negative is the owner doesn't have the relationship with the design professional they normally do, which is a very comfortable relationship owners have because the design professional is their eyes and ears during design and during construction. So that's the other. So then that's the meat of the slides. The rest of the slides are just comparing the models. So if you guys have any more questions, now's a good time to ask.
Yeah, I guess one of the questions I have is just with the legislation. It's section 2. You get paid, the CMR gets paid a percentage of what it would cost to build the project, correct?
There's several fees that the statute says. The fee structure is set up by statute, and the fees are, there's this CMR fee, which would be a percentage of the cost of the work, an at-risk fee, which in our request for proposal, we make them put that into their CMR fee. So that's a percentage fee. The other thing is the general conditions. So it comes into the proposal as a monthly cost for all of their time to be on site. So it's their job trailers, their construction management staff, everything that they have to pay to manage the work. And then there's the statute has a contingency, which is another percentage. So they'll take the cost of the work, they'll apply their CMR fee to that and their contingency fee to that. Then they'll take the proposed schedule, how long they think it's going to take. If it's 24 months, they'll take that monthly general condition costs and multiply it out by 24 months. And that's how the GMP will come in when we finally negotiate it after the design documents are completed.
Okay, so Rob, I guess I might be a little dense on this. So for the city entering into a contract with the CMR for professional services, is there a fee instantly that we're committing to that council is unaware of?
That's $150,000 to $200,000
So if we were to pass this tonight as it's worded, we would be committing the city to $150,000 to $200,000
per project.
per project.
Although I think
How
that
many projects are on this list?
3. So that is the total sum that council is being committed to.
Yeah.
Is that the subsequent percentage fees that he's talking about, which are in the revised code, are part of the build, and that council will have the opportunity to agree to those at a later time.
Okay, so if we pass this as it's written, we're agreeing for the city to enter into a contract for $600,000 potentially for each.
3 contracts.
We are,
3 contracts, a total of $600,000 without having to come back to council?
It was 450.
no, hold on.
That's what I'm asking, because you said
Yeah.
150 to 200 per project.
That is the anticipated cost of each one of these. If you would vote yes tonight, you are agreeing to go out for bid or go out to release a request for qualifications. But we have nobody on the hook for any of these.
No.
So no, if you vote yes tonight, you are not signing a $600,000 bill that's going out tomorrow.
But it says that we give the city permission
Yeah.
to enter into contract for.
Yes.
So the one I have here says to request for qualifications and identifying and selecting a qualified firm, like we do with do this in every other process. So when we find that qualified firm, and then I have the authority to spend up to $75,000. If it's $75,001, we have to then come back to you for the authority to spend it.
Actually, that's not the way it's written. Is
Correct.
that- Is that
That's not the way
section
it's written.
2 authorizes you to go into contract.
To enter into contract, with a selected firm or firms.
That's what I brought up several weeks ago.
Well, then I will be quiet.
So if we pass this as it's written, the city's council will be giving the city permission to enter into pay for 3 projects for up to $200,000 per project.
No, yeah.
150 to 200,000
Yeah,
per project, which could be $600,000. You do not have to come back to council, where council could look at to see if there's other options. Or have other future discussion on a project.
Well, for that amount, but
For that amount,
But
correct.
beyond that, is that council still has the authority before any dirt is turned. This is all still pre-construction work.
Correct, but this is still $600,000.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sorry.
No, it's not a problem.
I thank you, and I appreciate your time that you're asking and answering our questions.
Yeah, I don't have the legislation in front of me, so.
Correct, I know, we do.
Sir, in your professional opinion, do you believe the CMR is the best
Yes.
route of these 4
Yeah.
options?
Yeah,
Briefly,
absolutely.
why?
It's,
Just-
well, because, these 3 projects are complex. They're large projects. Projects that involve a CMR, when the CMR is brought on board earlier, there's just a better teamwork between the 3 parties. When I say the 3 parties, I mean the owner, the designer, and the construction manager. It creates a team during the pre-construction services, and the pre-construction services add a ton of value of planning, thinking through the project, and they can make the project just go smoother for the city for, if it's a year of pre-construction services, for the 24 months of active construction after that will make the project typically go smoother, less claims, less adversarial headbutting during the project. Usually projects, it's a little bit, the fee structure can be a little bit more expensive on smaller projects, but your projects are at that size that the fee is not going to add that much of an additional cost to it. So, and I will say the OFCC, which is the Ohio Facilities Construction Commission, they are at this point only doing CMR on any project of any size.
So, I'll just say, I'm all for a CMR project. I think that's the best way to go.
Yeah.
My concern is the fact of this legislation was presented to council and not explained until tonight when we've asked questions, that we would be committed to up to $600,000 tonight before we get to a project. And council has not been fully briefed on the entire group of projects yet. That's my concern. Just to make sure that I would love for us to hire a CMR. I think that is the absolute best way to do it. But I think council needs to have its head wrapped around the entire project, and I don't think all of council does. That's been my concern all along.
So I'm struggling with where in this legislation it's limiting us to like $750,000. Because if we're being committed to CMR services for these 3 projects, and I've still not got the answer to how we're going to pay for these 3 projects. I've heard tons of numbers out there passed around. I'm just going to throw one out. I've heard $150 million. Where's that coming from, and how are we going to pay this? Because if we're going out for services, it's more than just the pre-construction services. It's for the CMR services for the project, which is way more than $750,000.
By statute, the CMR has to be broken up into sections. So we cannot contract with the CMR beyond the pre-construction at this time. So that's why we're not going and making ourselves liable for anything beyond the pre-construction phase.
Okay.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk about funding.
Yeah, let's first of all, let's talk about public involvement. So all of these projects are going to be under the federal umbrella. So wastewater plant is in design. The other two projects have finished the planning phase. So as we go further, all these projects are going to have an involved section of public involvement. There's going to be a lot of actions needed by the public. I look at Kit. He has a great idea what he wants the inside of his building to look like. He doesn't care at all what the outside looks like. The drawing you've seen is the only one version we paid for. As we go to public involvement, there's a lot of public involvement that's going to happen. And for the non-wastewater plant, those are going to be included in the design because the designers will be responsible for the National Environmental Policy Act and going through those. We've had public meetings. We realize we have not addressed the comments from the public meetings, but we don't have any action because we don't have a designer. So once we get the designer, we're going to chew through the public involvement process. The thing that I love about the CMR is they're going to come back with what's called a guaranteed maximum price. So when you ask, what does it cost? There's numbers flying all over the place. Part of that is we don't know if the courthouse if we're going to take apart a building and use a building to build a courthouse, that's going to cost more than building a replica, or are we going to stand up walls and then build a courthouse behind walls? There's a lot of questions we need to answer from the public. And when we get this team together, if the architect commits us to doing something crazy, the CMR is going to say, let's not do that, it's too expensive. Let's do something else and see if that meets the public's need and the public's questions, right? So where we focused in preliminary side for the judge, for the police chief, for the law director has been, what does the inside of the building look like and how does it work? There's a lot of things that have to be taken care of in design as far as the outside. With the wastewater, we'll look at Aaron, we're a lot further along. We are ready to start picking out equipment. The CMR comes in the value of, hey, I've installed 12 of these in 14 different states. This is what works, this is what doesn't work.
Can I ask this question?
Yeah.
When was council going to be told that we would be committing to $600,000 tonight if we had not sat here and asked questions?
Well, okay, so
let
me back up.
Let me finish.
Okay.
The full council has not been briefed on this project or all of these projects together. I understand there's been a separate building committee for the municipal building and some planning. I get that. I understand that. That's where you start. Mm-hmm. But as a full council, we've not had that opportunity to have some public discussion about that. And then here tonight, if we had not asked questions, the next thing we would have known in a year or two is we would be saying, where are we spending $600,000 at? And you would have said, well, you agreed to it.
Well, you also have to vote on the budget.
Well, yes, but wouldn't it be easier to discuss the budget if we knew what we were passing? It's kind of like that, you got to pass it to see what's in it thing that we all joke about with the federal government. That's exactly, to me, what this looks like.
Well, let me back up. So what we did, we realized there was serious ambiguity in it. We had a meeting. I'll look at Mel and John and Rob, and we said, hey, this legislation needs clarity. At the end of the last council meeting, Mel came over and said, this needs to be improved. So we got together and we have itemized actions. So they're there to clarify what needs to happen. Let me back up one more thing. So if we put this out to bid, like we talked about, those costs would be in overhead, profit. At some point, if we're going to do any of these projects, you're going to incur those costs any which way.
Correct.
Yes.
But shouldn't we have a discussion about those projects as a full council to have full council completely on board with the project versus not talking about the cost of even what the CMR costs? Because when we had 2 weeks ago at the meeting, I asked the same question about pay. How is the CMR paid? And I heard a comment made, we'll discuss that at budget. So you as City Hall knew there was a cost to this, but you did not present that cost to City Council. We weren't making, unless we asked questions here today, we would not have known that we're committing to $600,000. And I understand, I agree with the CMR. And I agree if the project is finalized and this is what we're doing, I want us to save money and not, because I know if you change in the middle of a project or design or planning, and even say 7 months down the road, the CMR says, oh, this is a better way to save money, we have already spent money to hopefully find out maybe we could have saved more. And that's all I'm saying is I would like things presented to council to where we understand exactly what we're voting on. This kind of is a little bit like the EPA grant.
Mike, I hear you. I think one of the things that we have to keep in mind that we're talking about 3 projects that are going to be tens of millions. We're going to have to pay
Yes.
people a lot of money to design and get all. I mean, these CMRs. They're not free and they're not cheap.
No, I know.
And so I hear you saying that maybe we would have liked to have known a number, but 150 to 200,000. I'm thinking, yeah, we're gonna have, and if those companies can save us a couple million on each project somehow by their professionalism, that $600,000 is washed away, so to speak. I mean, we're
understand
talking
that.
major numbers here, so I guess I'm not getting too caught up on the fact that we didn't know that it may be 150 to 200,000. I mean, that doesn't.
Well, let's
I
go
guess
back.
it sets
Hang
up
on.
a stage for me for open, honest discussion about the entire project. We're not gonna be open and honest at the very beginning. How can we trust it's gonna be open and honest for the entire project?
Mike, let's go back to the last meeting. We had 2 companies.
We're about out of time.
Yeah, well, you answered my questions.
2 companies came and they said for this type of project, they both said 150 to 200,000.
Yes.
So those companies, maybe I did not say that, but the companies who presented last time said 100 to 250 per project is what you would expect. I know I didn't say
I'd have
that,
to go back and listen to the tape, what
but
they
they
said.
did.
I would have to listen. You've answered my questions.
Great.
Thank you.
Any more questions before we?
I think we're good. We're out of time.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
We're going to adjourn that committee meeting. We're going to move now to Parks and Recreation and Mr. Miller to discuss the Columbus Delano Field of Discovery.
Where am I at here? All right. Okay, with the parks, with the Columbus Delano Fields, Mr. Salyers, can you explain that in a little more detail? The history of Mr. Delano and why we chose to do that? And then I can answer a few more questions.
Yeah, sure. So, just a little background on where specifically we're talking about. If you look on the Harcourt Road entrance of the Aerial Foundation Park, what's sometimes referred to as the West Prairie. That is, right now has served for, I think, a year or so as a pollinator field, part of the Bee City and Tree City efforts back there, along with the Foundation Park Conservancy and a handful of volunteers throughout the community. They've really put a lot of effort in there. Right now, there are 50 native trees. The arbor already exists. There are some Johnny Appleseed trees, tree grafts that are out there right now. It's kind of, it exists in its infancy, but what we want to do is really kind of take it over and turn it into a thing. So we decided to, working with the Foundation Park Conservancy Board, separate that area out. We've determined to name it the Columbus Delano Field of Discovery in Aerial Foundation Park. Columbus Delano, for if you don't know, I'm sure the NAS guys know this, but his home is the Lake Holm House. He was at one point the Knox County prosecutor. He went on to become a congressman from this area. He was at one point, I think, either on the board of or was the president of the First Knox Bank, trustee of Kenyon College. He was almost the governor of Ohio. And then, more importantly, not really known for what you were almost the thing of, but he became, his real claim to fame was he became the Secretary of the Interior under Ulysses S. Grant, and he founded Yellowstone National Park. He came back and lived the remainder of his life here, and when he died, he was buried in Mound View Cemetery, so you can go see the grave of Columbus Delano. He has mountains named after him in Montana and Idaho, I believe, so I think the least we can do is a pollinator field. And he's got a couple streets named after him around here too. If I'm not, there's a city in Ohio named after him too, Columbus or something like that. That's what I'd like to believe. Anyhow, so the this park will include, or this area, I don't want to call it a separate park, it's a area within a park. It'll have those native pollinator and grass zones. It'll have a separate area for sunflower fields, so you can go get your selfies. It'll have walking trails with little educational kiosks set throughout there. We've talked about biodegradable public art installations. So what does that mean? We're talking about log sculptures, things like that, that will sit out there for so long, and then we can kind of shred those down and give them back to God. That way they're not sitting there forever. And then we can recycle those out. So it's something like it's always new. There's something to explore, discover. Yeah.
Question, who is maintaining the educational kiosks? Is this something that we're partnering with the colleges on, or?
Yes, and that's a big thing about this whole area. So between the city, between Foundation Park Conservancy, between the colleges, between Bee City, between a litany of different, and the reason that we chose Columbus Delano was because we've already reached out to ODNR, we've reached out to certain people that are sitting in the room, we've reached out to our Congressman Troy Balderson's office about actually connecting with the Interior Department and kind of getting that money from the Interior Department and working with opportunities there. So there are a lot of sources and organizations and individuals that can definitely pour into that. That way, it's not just a static. This is a tree, So we really want to make that a more broader opportunity, more broad.
So in effect, what this is doing is the city is going to take over the operation and maintenance of that far west end of the property.
Yeah.
Right now, that's been being taken care of by the Foundation Park Conservancy. The majority of everything that's there now, the native pollinator, some of the walking trails have been already established there. The city is hoping to add on to that, like the plan is, if it works out, the pollinator garden will be done by this spring. And there will be the sunflower field for people to go in, because take pictures in the sunflowers, people like that. The city will work with the colleges and other organizations for the educational kiosks, which have not gotten put up yet. There are signs and whatnot up there in the arboretum that's there and established by the Shade Tree Commission and the foundation. And so that'll be worked on. Tanner mentioned the biodegradable art stuff. And of course, we mentioned the arboretum, the native trees, and we've got the Johnny Seed Apple Heritage Arbor over there. And it's just the city's wanting to take over that, and the additional opportunity of doing some additional program that you may not be able to do as the foundation. Because the city parks department has a different liability than what a private organization has. So just as an example, if you wanted to, I don't know, have take people on a scenic hay wagon tour around the area, that's something that the city could do easier than, say, the foundation could do. Or 5K runs, things like that. Those are easier things for a city to deal with than what the private organization deal with. I was hoping to take this to its third and final reading tonight. The only thing I think that I need to do is make one small amendment, is to put a period in and replace one word in section 4 after management maintenance. The next thing that's on there for tonight is the city already has been allowing camping at Foundation Park for like the vets when they do their kickoff on their paddling trip. And I believe it's the Scouts Jamboree's been over there at least once, if not twice. Each time there is a function like that, the city is required to come to council the way the rules read. And I just don't think that's something the city should have to do or council needs to do. I think that's something that the safety service director could approve. And that also makes it easier if there's other organizations like, is it GOBA that used to come through in the summertime and they'd use Memorial Park? Right, so if a similar type activity were to take place at Foundation Park, the city could handle that. It'd be easier to coordinate up front with an organization to say, yes, you know, if Tanner's at a meeting, he can say, yeah, we don't have a problem with waiving that for that night. And that's where that other legislation change comes in. Yes, Tanner?
Yeah, well, we did receive some communication on this, and I just want to go ahead and get out ahead of it.
Yeah, I was going, yep.
So, we have, so the question is, you know, or the statement was made, we don't want camping in the parks, but as Mr. Miller already indicated, we have allowed folks to camp in certain parks in the past, not just Aerial Foundation, but in other parks, the Boy Scouts, Paddle for Heroes, et cetera. Council has had to approve those in the past. The whole point of this is not necessarily expanding camping, but streamlining that process. We are not, and I want to be very clear, not proposing to expand camping or to add, you know, campgrounds in the parks. We're not adding camping spots or any RV or camper hookups or anything like that. That is not what this is. The city, as already mentioned, enjoys a certain level of what we call sovereign immunity. So there was a question of, you know, well, if you allow people to camp, aren't they just going to show up and break their arms? Uh-oh, you know, like maybe, but that's come at your own risk. And then there was a question of property damage. This is actually a better system. So if you have to reserve a spot, you have to fill out a form. I get your information. You have to pay a fee. That person is not spray painting stuff on the wall. It's the person that shows up, pops a tent, doesn't tell you they're out there, and then defaces public property. That's the bad guy. All right, and then I have to send this guy out here and look
Well-
at him. Just look at him.
And again, wasn't this something that was coming to council probably 2 to 3 times a year anyway? And
Yeah.
this just takes this off of our plate because we don't issue anything with it anyway. It's
Right. So, and then at that point, you're relying on, you know, whatever organization to be proactive and understand the process. And most people don't understand that you have to reach out to the clerk of council and the safety service director and the law director to get a piece of legislation going and then get it up to 3 readings to talk about. Really? So, again, just streamlining the process. We will monitor the same way that we do now with MVPD if necessary. No new staff will be necessary. We will collect a fee through this. We have this recreation management software that'll be launched 1/1 of '25. The question was, have we asked for public input from the communities adjacent to the parks? No, we're not adding more campground. We're not turning anything into a campground. And like I said, we have done, in rare cases, people do camp in the parks. We're just streamlining this process. Why do people want to do this here? Because we have people want to access our scenic river. That's why they camp over in Memorial Park. We have hundreds of acres of parks. We have the confluence of 2 bike trails. So it's an attractive place for people to want to, you know, come and enjoy our parks. And that was part of that communication is we have wonderful park system. Don't let anybody enjoy them. Come on now. So
The
we can
legislation
do it
also
responsibly.
requires the safety service director to issue rules specifically laying it out
Yeah.
so that everyone will understand and that it won't be this, well, I know this person who can get me legislation. This way, anybody, any of these civic groups who want to do it will be able to look and see, these are the rules and this is what you have to do it.
It also says overnight camping, which obviously can mean overnight, but I'm going to apply that very stringently and say that we're not doing this for any more than 2 nights in a row. And then also it says should be issued for recreational, educational, and community events. This isn't, well, we're just hanging out, so can we camp in the park? Now, there's got to be a specific reason that you want to do this. And, you know, as we have administrative rules for a lot of things, there will be an administrative rule that follows this up. So I want, you know, the person that sent this communication, I want them to know, and I want the entirety of the community to know. We're not turning, you know, name any park, Memorial Park, you know, Arch Park, any park, Aerial Foundation, we are not turning it into a campground. We're just streamlining the process for the rare instance, 2 to 3 times out of the year, that some organization wants to utilize our park for a, you know, 1, maybe rare case of 2-night camp.
And I just have one more thing to address, and then we're done, is I also had some concern about people reading into down into the lower part of the legislation that's already existing, which we're not touching, because it would, is about the hours of the different parks. There was concern that Area Foundation might have different hours for being there after dark. And this, what we're proposing tonight, is only specifically dealing with the camping issue.
Yep.
So I think at some point in time, over the next year, maybe, I know there's many park rules that need to be gone through, and some of them maybe need to be put in code to where actually there's a little bit where at least the police department, if they need to, could write somebody a ticket for doing something that they shouldn't be doing, because right now they can't do that. So I think if we get through that, an overall assessment of all the park rules, we could address the concerns of different times maybe for some of the
Well,
different parks.
I actually believe that most of the parks have a sign that says
They
the
have some.
times.
Yep, they do.
So
They are posted.
that is something that the police department has used.
I would have an issue with charging a nonprofit like the Boy Scouts a fee. Is there a way around that? I mean, why charge somebody?
I don't want to make that statement right now, but essentially, it has been said multiple times that, these are public parks, so people should be able to use them for free, but simultaneously, you're charging for exclusive use at that point.
So, and my hope was to bring those to a third and final reading tonight. If anybody has any concern or questions about that, please let me know, and we can put it off to the third reading in 2 weeks.
And if council, if I can present council a draft of the administrative rules before we finalize them, if you guys would want, to have a conversation on what those are, that's maybe not, Amber, but your face says it. Don't play poker.
Any
But-
questions? If not, I think we're done with that committee.
Okay, we're now adjourned the Parks and Recreation. We're now in recess until 7:30 p.m. We'll begin the legislative portion of the meeting. We're going to call the legislative portion of the November 25th, 2024 session of City Council to order. Mr. Hill, please call the roll.
Mr. Mahan.
Here.
Mrs. Woods.
Here.
Mr. Ruckman.
Here.
Ms. Keener.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
Mrs. Seaval.
Here.
Mr. Severance.
He's in the hall.
He stepped out for a moment.
He's in the restroom.
Say it louder.
We are in session. The invocation this evening will be given by Dave Matos, and Dave is a chaplain with hospice, and I've met him recently at a home with a hospice patient, and I knew him before when he was to the hospice of North Central Ohio and Knox County. I appreciate what hospice chaplains do. Tough job, and appreciate what you do and the services you deliver to those patients. So please rise for the invocation and remain standing for the pledge.
Good evening. Thank you. It's been a privilege to serve Knox County, the patients and families for many years. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we give you thanks this Thanksgiving for the many blessings bestowed upon our city, our county. We thank you for the blessings of living in Mount Vernon and Knox County, our safety, our families, our prosperity. We pray you give our mayor and councilmen and leaders, continue to give them wisdom as they guide our city and county. We pray for your prosperity. We pray you bless our local businesses, schools, first responders, our healthcare institutions, and our churches. Continue to help us to take care of the sick, the needy, the poor, and elderly in our county. We pray for peace in our lives and peace around the world. We pray this in the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain.
Thank you.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Council, in your packets were the minutes from the November 12th meeting. Are there any additions or corrections? If not, I'd ask for a motion for approval.
I would like to approve that.
Second.
And moved and seconded that they be approved. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. They are approved. Mr. Hill, petitions and communications.
Yes, we received one letter, communication from Robert Beck, Bob and Linda Beck of Mount Vernon, and that has been entered into the record.
Okay, it's been entered in the record. Thank you. Council, in your packet were the committee meetings from four committee meetings for your review. And we do have one liquor control license.
Is that me?
That's you.
So this is to KD Brothers, Inc., doing business as Baker's IGA, Mount Vernon, and, oh, it's brand new. So if anybody has any questions or comments, they can contact Mr. Hill.
Thank you. And proclamations?
None.
And person speaking on matters of city concern? And now, that being said, we'll move into the legislative portion of the meeting. Council, that the packet was sent to you electronically, or are there any additions or corrections? Not, I'll assume it's approved by consensus, and we move to resolutions now for third reading. The first one is resolution number 2024-102. Mr. Hill.
Resolution number 2024-102, a resolution authorizing the Safety Service Director to release a request for qualifications for identifying and selecting a qualified firm or firms to provide professional services for owners' representative services related to the construction of municipal buildings, identify and enter into contract with the selected firm or firms for the professional services for owners' representative services related to the construction of municipal buildings, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Severance.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I move to amend Resolution 2024-102
Second.
as follows.
Let us know what you're amending.
All right. Council, you have a copy of this that has the red letters on it. I don't know if this has to be read publicly.
Yeah.
Yes? Okay. So in the top part, we have added the words "and facilities" after construction of municipal buildings, so that it's not just buildings but facilities, because we are bringing in the water department, okay? Again, in the bottom line of the main resolution wording is buildings and facilities. In section 1, we decided we wanted to give a little bit more specificity. So in the last sentence, actually it's one sentence, we are after, for the construction of the municipal buildings and facilities, 1, wastewater plant rehabilitation and phosphorus upgrade, 2, new police department, and 3, new justice center, parenthesis courthouse. And then we are going to strike section 2. That way section 3 will become section 2 on this particular piece.
Mel, could
do
I
we-
add that in the top? you
Yeah.
Enter into contract in the top, stricken also,
Right here.
in the
now.
top paragraph.
Yes,
about 5
and
lines
enter
down,
into
please.
contract, yes, correct. We
That
would
goes along the
strike
instructions,
that.
so I can-
Is there a second to that amendment?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that this resolution be amended. Any discussion on the amendment?
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman, Yes. Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes,
Mrs. Seabolt,
Yes.
Mr. Severns.
Yes,
This resolution has been amended. Mr. Severance,
yes, I move to pass resolution 2024-102
Second.
as amended.
As amended.
as amended, correct.
Been moved and seconded that this resolution be adopted as amended. Any discussion? Mr. Hill?
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman, Yes. Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
yes,
Mrs. Seabolt,
Yes.
Mr. Severns.
Yes,
Resolution is adopted. Next resolution for third reading is resolution number 2024-112. Mr. Hill?
Resolution number 2024-112, a resolution authorizing the Safety Service Director to advertise for bids and enter into contract for the 2024 CDBG East Vine Street Sidewalk Project and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Severance?
yes, I move to adopt resolution 2024-112.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for the adoption of this resolution. Any discussion? Mr. Severance?
We've talked about this, East Vine Street. Brian gave us a humongous map a week ago that would start a good campfire if you needed some kindling. But other than that, I think we're good. Any other comments or
Any
questions?
other questions? Mr. Hill?
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman,
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
yes,
Mrs. Seabolt,
Yes.
Mr. Severns.
Yes,
Resolution is adopted. Now I move to resolutions for second reading. We have one. That's resolution number 2024-119. Mr. Hill?
Resolution number 2024-119, a resolution creating the Columbus Delano Field of Discovery and Aerial Foundation Park.
Mr. Miller?
Mr. President, I wish to just make one amendment to this before we proceed. If I could make the amendment that in section 4, it would read, management and maintenance, of the Columbus Delano Field of Discovery shall be managed by the city of Mount Vernon, period. And the city shall continue in partnership with Aerial Foundation Conservancy.
Is there a second to the amendment?
second.
It's been moved and seconded that this resolution be amended. Discussion. Mr. Hill?
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman,
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes,
Mrs. Seabolt,
Yes.
Mr. Severns.
Yes,
The resolution has been amended. Mr.
Mr. President, I move to suspend the rule requiring 3 separate readings and take Resolution 2024-119 to its third and final reading.
Second?
And moved and second for the suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill?
Mr. Mahan?
Yes.
Mrs. Woods?
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman?
Yep.
Ms. Keener?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mrs. Seabolt?
Yes.
Mr. Severns?
Yes.
The rule is suspended. We're now ready to discuss Resolution 2024-119 as amended. Mr. Miller?
I move to adopt Resolution 2024-119
As
As
amended.
amended.
As amended.
as amended.
Second?
And we would second this resolution be adopted as amended. Any discussion? Mr. Miller?
I have none.
Any other questions? Mr. Hill?
Mr. Mahan?
Yes.
Mrs. Woods?
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman?
Yes.
Ms. Keener?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mrs. Seabolt?
Yes.
Mr. Severns?
Yes.
Resolution as amended is adopted. Next, we move to resolutions for first reading. The first one is resolution number 2024-121. Mr. Hill.
Resolution number 2024-121, a resolution confirming the mayor's reappointment of Aaron Daniels as a member of the new Community Authority Board of Trustees for a one-year term and declaring an emergency.
Mrs. Woods.
Thank you, sir. I move to suspend the rules and take Resolution 2024-121 to its third and final reading.
Second?
We move to second for the suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill.
Mr. Mahan?
Yes.
Mrs. Woods?
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman?
Yes.
Ms. Keener?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mrs. Seabolt?
Yes.
Mr. Severns?
Yes.
The roll is suspended. Mrs. Woods.
Move to adopt Resolution 2024-121.
Second?
We move to second for the adoption of this resolution. Any discussion? Mrs. Woods.
Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Councilwoman and Council. This is pretty much a housekeeping matter right now. The new Community Authority has had one meeting or two meetings. We've had two meetings, and we are looking at someone else actually wanting to join now, so we've begun that paperwork. So we haven't had a need to meet yet, but we will be doing that. When I asked Aaron about continuing, it was a resounding yes, please. So there will be another one that we will need to replace whose term has expired. That will be forthcoming, if not by the end of the year anyway.
Any other discussion? Mr. Hill.
Mr. Mahan?
Yes.
Mrs. Woods?
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman?
Yes.
Ms. Keener?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mrs. Seabolt?
Yes.
Mr. Severns?
Yes.
Resolution is adopted. Next resolution is resolution number 2024-122. Mr. Hill.
Resolution number 2024-122, a resolution authorizing and directing the Safety Service Director to enter into contract with CDC of Ohio, Inc. for administration of PY 2024 Community Development Allocation and Neighborhood Revitalization Grant Programs and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Severns.
Yes, I move to suspend the rule requiring 3 separate readings and take Resolution 2024-122 to its third and final reading.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for the suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill.
Mr. Mahan?
Yes.
Mrs. Woods?
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman?
Yes.
Ms. Keener?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mrs. Seabolt?
Yes.
Mr. Severns?
Yes.
The rule is suspended. Mr. Severns.
Yes, I move to adopt Resolution 2024-122.
Seconded.
Been moved and seconded for the adoption of this resolution. Any discussion? Mr. Severns.
Yes, Tanner, could you fill us in here a little bit on this?
Yes, CDC of Ohio is the consultant that we utilize for a lot of our CDBG grants. This is a contract to allow us to go to use them again for a consultation on our project for CDBG over three CDBG projects.
So I have a question. It says the beginning date shall be September 1st of 2024. Have they already been working under this?
They have been working on several of our projects. Do you want to explain? Yeah. This is not a new firm with us now. This
Right.
term will be a. Yeah.
Right, so this is a performance base, so where they don't get paid until the grant is approved. So the work they did to apply for these 3 grants, they only get paid if the project gets done through the administration. of the project. So the work they did to apply for the grants is basically pro bono. The mayor just signed the critical grant, I think, Friday.
Yeah.
So there is no money has changed hands at this point. But once we start to do the projects, they get paid directly by the state to administer the program.
So likely the term is the scope of the distribution.
I just wondered if, we're like, should we have approved it before they got started? or-
No, we can't. So the state backdates the agreements to September 1st, even though they just sent them out last week.
Okay,
So it's based on the state standard.
thank you.
Yep, no problem.
Any other discussion? Mr. Hill?
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods,
Yes,
Mr. Ruckman,
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Seabolt,
Yes,
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Resolution is adopted. Next resolution is resolution number 2024-123. Mr. Hill.
Resolution number 2024-123, a resolution authorizing and directing the auditor of the city of Mount Vernon to transfer certain funds.
Mrs. Seabolt.
thank you. I would like to suspend the rules that require 3 separate readings and take resolution number 2024-123 to its third and final reading.
second,
And moved and seconded for the suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill.
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods,
yes,
Mr. Ruckman,
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Seabolt,
Yes,
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
The rule is suspended. Mrs. Seabolt.
I move to adopt resolution number 2024-123.
second,
And moved and seconded for the adoption of this resolution. Any discussion? Mrs. Seabolt.
Thank you. Paul, would you like to tell us about this?
So Aaron told me a little bit earlier today that he needs some more water meters. And this is actually a good thing. He has some extra funds in different accounts, and he's going to buy these water meters ahead of time before the price goes up. So this is actually a good thing. This is a little bit complicated here, but basically we're taking it from 4 different accounts in water and wastewater and putting them into 2 different accounts here.
Any other questions? Mr. Hill.
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods,
yes,
Mr. Ruckman,
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Seabolt,
Yes,
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Resolution is adopted. Next resolution is resolution number 2024-124. Mr. Hill.
Resolution number 2024-124, a resolution authorizing and directing the Safety Service Director to enter into contracts with the Ohio Department of Transportation for snow and ice removal and control and maintenance and repair on state highways within and contiguous to the city, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Severns.
Yes, I move to suspend the rules requiring 3 separate readings and take resolution 2024-124 to its third and final reading.
Second?
And moved and seconded for the suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill.
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods,
yes,
Mr. Ruckman,
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Seabolt,
yes,
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
The rule is suspended. Mr. Severns.
Yes, I move to adopt resolution 2024-124.
Second?
And moved and seconded for the adoption of this resolution. Any discussion?
Yes, Tanner, could you talk to us about this one a little bit?
Yes, the white death is upon us. The snow has already started to fall, so what this resolution does is it permits ODOT to utilize its snow removal and ice control management and materials within the city limits on particular state highways and U.S. routes within the city. So that's 313, 229, 586, 661, 768, and U.S. Route 36 within the city limits. Pretty
Any other
cut and
discussion?
dry.
Well,
You got anything?
well, there's also some maintenance parts, and for doing this, for allowing ODOT to do that, we picked up a couple of pieces that are contiguous to the city that are technically in the townships. So it's a swap of responsibilities. It just makes it more efficient for them to do stretches and then us to do different stretches.
There are pieces around the city, if you've ever seen a actual city zoned map of these little islands that aren't technically in the city, but we'll take care of it anyway because we're good guys.
Mr. Hill.
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman,
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Seabolt,
Yes.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Resolution is adopted. Next resolution is resolution number 2024-125. Mr. Hill.
Resolution number 2024-125, a resolution authorizing and directing the auditor of the City of Mount Vernon to pay bills pursuant to Section 5705.41D, then and now certification.
Mrs. Seabolt.
Thank you. I would like to suspend the rules that require 3 separate readings and take resolution number 2024-125 to its third and final reading.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for the suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill.
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman,
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Seabolt,
Yes.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Rule suspended. Mrs. Seabolt.
I move to adopt resolution number 2024-125.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for the adoption of this resolution. Any discussion? Mrs. Seabolt.
Thank you. Oh, we're not too fond of then and now, but I guess we've got about $36,000 here. The health department.
Yeah, I'm not fond of them either, and once we get to a situation where we have better understanding of what's going on, we shouldn't have much of these. But basically, both of these are examples of the invoices coming in before we get a purchase order request on those. So the first one, American Electric Power, is for street lighting, and then the Knox Public Health contract for General Health District.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Hill.
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman,
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Seabolt,
Yes.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Resolution is adopted. Next resolution is resolution number 2024-126. Mr. Hill.
Resolution number 2024-126, a resolution authorizing and directing the auditor of the City of Mount Vernon to make supplemental appropriations.
Mrs. Seabolt.
Thank you. I would like to suspend the rules that require 3 separate readings and take resolution number 2024-126 to its third and final reading.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for the suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill.
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman,
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Seabolt,
Yes.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Rule is suspended. Mrs. Seabolt.
I move to adopt resolution number 2024-126.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for the adoption of this resolution. Any discussion? Mrs. Seabolt.
Thank you. $30,203.
$30,203 from State Homeland Security Program grant to the fire department to purchase hazmat gas monitoring and testing equipment per proper procedure. We would put this into revenue line 224-1300-41401. And then what we're asking here is to increase the appropriations in the expense account 224-2100-55511 by $30,203, so we can expense those and they can buy the equipment that they need.
Good.
Any other discussion?
Thank you.
Mr. Hill.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman,
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Seabolt,
Yes.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
The resolution is adopted. The final resolution for this evening is resolution number 2024-127. Mr. Hill.
Resolution number 2024-127, a resolution authorizing and directing the auditor of the City of Mount Vernon to transfer certain funds.
Mrs. Seabolt.
I would like to suspend the rules that require 3 separate readings and take resolution number 2024-127 to its third and final reading.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill.
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman,
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Seabolt,
Yes.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
The roll is suspended. Mrs. Seabolt.
I move to adopt resolution number 2024-127.
Second.
Been moved and second for the adoption of this resolution. Any discussion? Mrs. Seawold?
Thank you. Now we're going to talk about street lighting.
So this is, we asked for some funds in street lighting because the AEP is charging us some more money this year. Tom Hinkle explained it to me. I don't know enough about it to explain it to you, but basically, they didn't charge us enough in the past, so now they're charging us more now in that regard. Anyway, this is due to, we thought we had enough money appropriated last time and made the transfers, but we forgot about how the end of the year closes out, and we're going to need some money to send them before January hits us. So they wanted 15,000. I found 13,000. They said that was close enough, so we're going to go with this.
We'll be in the light then.
We will.
That's like an exact figure, seriously. Any other discussion? Mr. Hill?
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods.
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman,
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mrs. Seaval,
Yes.
Mr. Severance.
Yes.
Resolution is adopted. Now we move to ordinances. We have no ordinances for third reading. We have two for second reading. The first one is ordinance number 2024-45. Mr. Hill?
Ordinance number 2024-45, an ordinance to approve, adopt, and enact the August 2024 replacement pages to the codified ordinances, to repeal ordinances in conflict therewith, to publish the enactment of new matter, and declaring an emergency.
Mrs. Keener?
Thank you, Mr. President. I am going to just give this its second reading, and again, if anybody has spare time over the Thanksgiving break and wants this, feel free.
Thank you. This ordinance receives its second reading. Now I move to ordinance number 2024-46. Mr. Hill?
Ordinance number 2024-46, an ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to permit overnight camping in city-owned parks.
Mr. President, I move to suspend the rule requiring 3 separate readings and take ordinance 2024-46 to its third and final reading.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for the suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill?
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
Mrs. Woods.
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman.
Yes.
Ms. Keener.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mrs. Seaval.
Yes.
Mr. Severance.
Yes.
The rule is suspended. Mr. Miller?
I move to adopt ordinance 2024-46.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for the adoption of this ordinance. Any discussion? Mr. Miller?
I have none.
Anybody else?
Else?
Mr. Hill?
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
Mrs. Woods.
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman.
Yes.
Ms. Keener.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mrs. Seaval.
Yes.
Mr. Severance.
Yes.
The ordinance is adopted. The final ordinance for this evening is ordinance number 2024-47. Mr. Hill?
Ordinance number 2024-47, an ordinance to cap annual contributions to the Mount Vernon Reserve Balance Account and to establish provisions for fund transfer to an interest-bearing account and management of the new account.
Mrs. Seawold?
Thank you. I would like to suspend the rules that require 3 separate readings and take ordinance number 2024-47 to its third and final reading.
Should I make the motion to amend this now or wait till after she's suspended the rules?
You can make an amendment at any time during the process, so she can suspend the rules, and then you can make the amendment.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a second on the suspension?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Suspend the rule. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill?
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
Mrs. Woods.
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman.
Yes.
Ms. Keener.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mrs. Seaval.
Yes.
Mr. Severance.
Yes.
The rule is suspended. Mrs. Seawold?
Can I make the motion to amend Section 1, letter A, the word prior to change to upcoming fiscal year?
Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded for this amendment. Any discussion on the amendment? Mr. Hill?
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
Mrs. Woods.
Yes.
Mr. Ruckman.
Yes.
Ms. Keener.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mrs. Seaval.
Yes.
Mr. Severance.
Yes.
This ordinance is amended. Mrs. Seawold?
I move to adopt ordinance number 2024-47 as amended.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that this ordinance be adopted as amended. Any discussion? Mrs. Seawold?
Thank you. Who's going to talk about it?
Do you have any more questions? We discussed it in the
With
committee. Yeah.
We had a committee meeting on it, and I'm not sure if anybody has any questions. If we don't, then we can go ahead and we're going to vote. We're not changing anything, we're just moving money from one place to another, but nothing's being spent. It's all safe and sound, right, Tanner?
Yes, absolutely.
No one's touching it,
Nope.
just moving it.
One fell swoop.
We're putting it into an interest-bearing account.
Mr. Hill?
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Mrs. Woods.
Yes?
Mr. Ruckman.
Yes.
Ms. Keener.
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
Mrs. Seavel.
Yes,
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
This ordinance as amended is adopted. Now we move to remarks of administration. Mayor Starr.
Thank you, Mr. President and Council. Council, I did give you an update, so I'm not going to rehash all of those things. Hopefully, you've been able to follow along on that. I do want to pay special attention because one of the things that will impact our budget in future years will be that police pension fund. And so please pay close attention to that. If you have not had a chance, or if you would like to reach out to our representatives, I'll help you with that. The other thing is, we have, well, happy Thanksgiving first of all, and then second, we'll look forward to seeing you all at the Downtown Festival, the Christmas Parade and walk. So anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
Sires.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, council, for passing that ordinance. That really makes my life simple as we go into working on the final chapter of the budget, or at least a budget proposal, which brings me to the question that Janice just asked me a few minutes ago. When can we meet on the budget? I am finalizing after working with several of the department heads, and we will be continuing some of those discussions into this week and early next week. By, I believe, December 3rd, you will all have and I can get you a physical copy if you'd like, but you will have a Google Sheet shared with you for both the general and non-general funds that you will be able to explore. You will have viewership access that way. And then also you will receive a physical copy, and then you'll have an electronic copy at your disposal if you'd like, of a budget narrative. And that will talk through the future proposed budget process, some budget themes. It'll talk through our major capital improvement projects and kind of lay out some of the anticipated costs for '25. It'll talk through, kind of like we did last year, the costs for '25 projects, any sort of personnel requests, anything that the administration would like to pose to you, anything that is in this document that you will see. The goal being that if anybody in the community would want to read this too, it's available. When it's done, it will be available. That anybody in the community could read through this and feel confident enough to understand the budget that's being proposed enough to have a conversation with, amongst themselves, with you, with the administration. But anything that we put in this budget narrative will also be in the budget that you'll be seeing. So if there is, a project or a person, that position or that project is in the budget. So if you're asking, is there money? Have we budgeted for this? The answer is yes. So, but you will have those delivered to you December 3rd. And then what I will ask is for 3 readings. Again, this is not an interim budget. There's no interim being proposed this time. We're going to do one budget. So I would ask council, you'll receive 1 reading on December 9th. I would ask for a special council meeting on December 16th that will specifically be about the budget. And then your final December, which will serve as a 2nd reading. And then your final December 23rd council meeting would be, or you would hopefully adopt the budget. If there are other work days that need scheduled throughout December, that is your decision as well. Of course, you will have around the
read those dates again.
9th. So the 2 of those are regular scheduled council meetings, the 9th and the 23rd. I would ask for 1 off Monday council meeting, which is the 16th. And then if other meetings need scheduled, see what the Buckeyes are doing.
So you're thinking we'll have budget discussions at the regular meetings too? Is that?
Yeah, so if you want to hold a 30-minute, of course, there's always opportunities to contact the administration at any point in time. If you want to hold two 30-minute committee meetings regarding the budget at those two at December 23rd and then, or sorry, December 9th and December 23rd, I would recommend the 16th be entirely about the budget. And then, as we have done in the past, if you want to do a Saturday morning or any other day, whatever. But if we want to do one or two of those, that's your discretion. Name the time and place, and I'll be there. And then, of course, with the access that you'll have electronically, feel free to send questions, just a stream of questions at any time, and I can do that electronically as well, or stop in. So I believe between those three meetings, those three public meetings that anybody can attend, the however many work sessions you decide to schedule independently, which people can attend as well, or any communications that you have via electronically or just stopping in and talking to us, we should have all of your answers or all of your questions answered, all of your answers questioned. And again, we're not only, as we have done in the past, just dropping a stack of spreadsheets on you and being like, well, there it is. We're providing probably what will be a 20-page budget narrative on top of that tells the story of the budget. So.
Mr. Stiller?
Nothing tonight,
Mr. Mayville?
Nothing.
Mr. Braun?
Thank you, Mr. President. First off, I want to welcome Katie Steele to the Law Director's Office. She is our new victim advocate. She replaces Ellie Klein, who had been with the office for almost 9 years. She comes to us from New Directions, and she has a background in dealing with victims of domestic violence, and which she will continue, as well as broadening her portfolio to include victims of other types of crimes. We're pleased to have her, and she started a week ago, Monday. So, secondly, next meeting, we're going to have legislation for several easements related to AEP transmission lines that are going to come across down off of High Street and then over to East Vine Street. This is providing power to the building that the land bank is currently renovating, the former Mount Vernon News Building. The current electrical system and transmission is not sufficient for the new uses of the building. And so to do that, AEP is going to have to do a new line, and those will have to cross over several parcels of city property, and they're going to ask us to grant them easements. There'll be the written easements as well as the map sort of showing the location. We're going to ask you to pass that legislation on the first reading because of the construction needs of the project. I just wanted to get that out there. I will, as soon as I get the surveys and what the specific easements look like, I will share them with council even before it's in legislation. Okay? Thank you.
Mr. Sevel?
Thank you. Well, we've already taken care of Tanner's Christmas present, because he asked for 3 presents, and by us passing it tonight, that took care of his 3 presents. So we don't have to buy him anything else, everybody. So Tanner's taken care of. I wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. And that's it.
Mr. Severance?
Yes, a couple things tonight real quick. So, streetlights. Mayor Starr, I do appreciate you sending us the information that we received. I don't know if that's something that's going to go out to the public or if it's on the website.
I can't.
But, streetlights are important. I reported 6 lights out 4 of them that were in front of Erico, our friends who finally got rid of the green machine, and 4 of them were right there in front of their buildings on Greenwood, and then 2 on Clinton Road, which I drive quite frequently. And I just did those a few days ago, and they are already fixed with LED lights. So I appreciate the quick responsiveness of my contact, who I texted pictures to. But I would just tell you that if you want to report a street light that's out, you can email a picture of the metal plates on there to my email, which is on the city website, and an approximate street address, and AEP will get on those quickly. I do want to note that the new lights are better. The new lights that were just put up on the 6 lights I mentioned, I drove there on the way here tonight, and because it's already dark. And just a reminder, some people are just getting home from work and they want to walk dogs and things, and we need to be able to see these people. And especially on our streets that do not have sidewalks, and we have a good number of those. We've dealt with that issue over around the high school and everything across there. But the lighting in the LED lights is brighter, and it does help you to see the intersections better. So I think it's important, and if the numbers are correct that the mayor gave us, if we replaced all 1,600 lights possible around that number in our city, we would save around $56,000 per year. That starts to add up. That's a good payment on some of these buildings we have to build. So I just want to point out that the street lights are important. Second thing I want to say is somebody gave us a copy of the municipal planning meetings in other cities that are not too far distant from us. And they are all at 6 or 6:30 or 7. And I know we've had a few complaints about the meetings being at 4 o'clock. I think we just need to consider some other times and at least have a discussion about that for the municipal planning meetings. Thank you. That's it, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. Miller?
I would just say, for on December the 9th meeting, I would ask if the mayor's office could have a little light on the legislation, only what we need to. Yes,
You mean an
no.
LED?
You can tell I have a great sense of humor. I'm known for that.
Which legislation?
Legislation or ordinances that we need to hear for the 9th for budget discussion. Since you're asking city council to have budget discussion on December the 9th and then on the 16th. That is greatly shortened from what we did last year, which I don't know if last year was out of the ordinary because that was the first one. But I would just ask to have it as light as possible so we could have time to discuss the budget. And then the other, I look forward to having a public meeting about these construction projects that the city's facing. That a full city council have public discussion at a committee meeting about these projects.
Mrs. Keener?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Hill, could I have a 45-minute committee meeting scheduled for the next council meeting at which we go over just publicly where we are on the courthouse, on the police department? I think that some of those only have basic renderings. But I think for council to be on the same page, there's also been a report done that I think council should just have as discussion. I don't know that that will change our trajectory in any way, but I think it will help conversation moving forward so that we can have at least a general concept and get on the same page so that we understand what those next steps are. Because I think that there is a list of what next steps are, and I think that that would help us. Also, everybody have a happy Thanksgiving, and don't forget that the Saturday after Thanksgiving, November 30th, is Shop Small Saturday. Our downtown has great events on that Saturday, and everybody is generally opened up, and lots of people are down there to shop. So go down, get your breakfast, get your cup of coffee, and buy some Christmas presents downtown. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. Mahan?
Thank you to the city departments. I know all across the city, I've met with the fire department, the police department. I'm sure that all across the city, people are having budget meetings, getting ready for this season, and that's a lot of work. And I know it's a lot of work, especially this year. We're kind of learning, all of us are learning together as we go along, and I believe that we're going to come out on the other side of this with a better process, and I appreciate everyone who's working on the budgets in the city, auditor, treasurer, safety service director, all the departments. Thanks for your work on that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mrs. Woods?
So I just have a question about lighting, because I've gotten calls on that too. But this is in reference to, Don Carr spoke about the lighting in the development over there. Is there a way to get the glass put back in after they replace those bulbs? No? Okay. Okay. I was asked to ask, so there you go. Okay. Again, hope everybody has a great Thanksgiving. Here it's going to be a little slushy out, so please be safe. Could I ask, Rob, if there's anything we can do legislatively, and I don't need this answer right this second, to change where he can approve then and not have to bring so many then and nows and budget adjustments? I know we changed that dollar amount for budget adjustments, but in a budget this large, for some reason, $6,000 is sticking in my head that he can, but I'm looking at, was it three? In a budget this large, I'm looking at, you know, it's within somebody's budget, not being able to move money and having to wait for us to approve. Is there a limit to what we can give him authority-wise to make
The
this?
state sets that.
Does he?
What's the ORC cap on that?
I know there's no ORC cap on then and nows, but is there on budget adjustments?
I'd have to,
Because
Okay.
we raised
Okay,
mine from
yeah.
50
I
to
was thinking that
75.
now.
Can
Yeah.
we raise it?
well, the 75 was legislatively changed for the
Yeah,
stuff
but
that has
there's
to
a
go to council.
Bid,
There's
yeah.
an ORC cap on that too.
I know there's an ORC cap on then and nows, and
Yeah.
it might be different for you guys, but if we can get those up to
Oh,
a
yeah,
cap,
okay, good idea.
Yes.
yeah, so that we don't have so much coming here, it's,
I will do some research and I will
Thank
send
you.
something to all of council
Okay.
so that we understand what the revised code allows.
it would just
And
speed up
once
some
you
of
have
those
that-
payments
And
and,
once we have that, you can decide
okay,
what you want me to do.
thank you. That's all I have.
Mr. Ruckman?
Nothing this evening, Mr. President.
I also had some comments from people in the public on the lighting, and they don't all agree with Mr. Severance, how bright they are. And I appreciate the mayor going in and looking at different options. Are there other ways that can be done? Safety's number one. I understand that. But if people if they're so bright that it's obtrusive to people, we need to look at that. And we need to see what we can do. And it's an issue. I appreciate the letter you wrote to council and discussing it. Let's look at options. Somebody brought it up, and it's from the public, and we need to at least address it and see what can be done. Keep in mind, safety's number one, but number two, we need to have it so it's acceptable to the community. That being said, happy Thanksgiving. Hope to see people at the parade and celebration this weekend, and go Bucks. Thank you, media, for being here. That being said, I call for adjournment.
So move.
Second.
Then move in second, we adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. We are adjourned.